So I want you to imagine something for a second. Picture a chaotic cityscape, all that motion, all that noise, and that kind of conflicting energy.
Right.
But then you realize that within that chaos, everything, every car, every light is following this sort of invisible set of rules. For a lot of artists, the canvas functions in a really similar way. It's a sanctuary.
Yeah, it's a dedicated space.
Exactly. It's this territory where all the conflict and chaos of the outside world can be, well, contained, managed, and finally transformed into something else.
And that idea of a controlled transformation is precisely what we're going to be exploring today. Our whole mission here is to do a deep dive into the abstract work of the painter Chen Tao-Ming.
We're really going to try and figure out how he creates these pieces that feel at the same time both full of this profound spiritual harmony and this restless, rebellious inner turmoil.
It seems like a complete contradiction.
It does. And what makes this so fascinating is the surprising mix of ideas he uses to get that balance. We're going to see him bring together ancient Chinese cosmic philosophy with ideas from Western psychology, abstract expressionism.
And even, believe it or not, the mystical poetry of William Blake.
And the one that really gets me, a training concept from the famous bodybuilder Charles Atlas. Genuinely.
That synthesis is really the heart of his genius, I think. And our analysis today, it's grounded in the observations of Richard Vine. He's the former editor of Art in America and the author of New China, New Art.
So he provides a really authoritative map for us to follow.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with the artist's mindset. For Chen Tao-Ming, it all begins with how he sees the canvas. He views it as a personal inner domain.
Right, and that demarcation, that's absolutely critical. He's defining the boundaries of his exploration right from the start.
So within this territory he's claimed for himself, he makes a very firm decision about what kind of conflict is even allowed in.
He does. The source material really emphasizes that all the turmoil he's dealing with is strictly psychological, formal, and chromatic.
Meaning he's working with the language of art itself, color, shape, texture, and his own internal mental states.
Precisely. And this is the crucial part. These internal conflicts are kept entirely separate from what he calls the bloody reality of the outside world.
He's deliberately cordoning it off.
He is. He's separating his spiritual and aesthetic struggle from, social or political chaos. You could almost think of it as a specialized, controlled laboratory for conflict.
But that raises a question for me. I mean, the conflict has to feel real to the viewer, right? If he's painting during a turbulent time, is it even possible for an artist to completely separate that inner domain from what's happening outside?
That's a great point. And I think it's less about ignoring the outside world and more about, say, refiltering it.
Okay.
He's not trying to paint a picture of external events. He takes the feeling of that anxiety, that social pressure, and forces it to manifest only through his materials, through color and form and composition.
So the turmoil is real, but the setting is completely managed. It's aestheticized.
Exactly. And by doing that, he gives himself permission to explore this really deep internal discord without being, overwhelmed or constrained by some external social agenda. The management of the conflict becomes the art.
So this controlled environment he creates is the structure for this fundamental paradox that we see in his work. These compositions hold these seemingly opposing forces in equal measure.
Yes, and that's where the visual fascination really begins.
Right.
On the one hand, his work is just steeped in this ancient wisdom. His compositions are often described as beautiful and serene.
I can see that.
They're deeply rooted in the Chinese traditional cosmic theory of yin and yang, this idea that everything exists as these inseparable contradictory opposites. So when you first look, the works just radiate this sense of harmony and stability.
So you feel grounded, almost eternal. But then you pause, you look a little closer, and that feeling of peace is just immediately challenged by this immense internal energy.
Yes. The second part of the paradox hits you.
In parallel with that serenity, the works show continuous change and complex layering. He's not satisfied with just calm.
No, absolutely not. The serenity is just the starting point. It's not the destination. From one layer of paint to the next, he constantly raises new questions.
You can feel it in the texture.
You can. The sheer physical energy you can see in the imagery, the way the paint is applied, sometimes torn, layered up, it conveys this really strong, rebellious and defiant mindset. It's an act of resistance, but it's all played out right there on the canvas.
So the beauty isn't coming from the absence of a fight. The beauty is in the containment of a really powerful fight within this stable, cosmic structure.
That is a perfect way to put it.
It's not a peaceful universe he's painting. It's a universe that has achieved a kind of temporary, magnificent peace, but by sheer force of will.
The stability is found within the flux, not outside it. He's creating this world where two huge contradictory forces, cosmic balance and this unending rebellion, are allowed to just rage against each other without tearing the whole thing apart.
Which brings us to the next logical question then. How? How does he physically hold these two giant forces in place? What's the mechanism?
Right. What are the tools he's using?
That's the perfect transition. We need to go from this abstract philosophical paradox to the concrete visual details, the tug of war.
Visually, we can track this flux in two main ways.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at the forms themselves and then the relationship between the colors.
Okay, let's start with the movement. The forms he paints are incredibly unstable.
They really are.
I mean, the source notes describe these shapes as nothing and suddenly there, and then they become ephemeral and quickly hidden.
They emerge and retreat.
Yeah, it's like they appear out of a fog and then just instantly pull back. And this constant fleeting existence, it gives the whole piece this nervous internal motion.
And you see that motion translated right into the medium. The way the pigment is applied, it's dense, it's complex, it's layered, it's not smooth or accidental. It's a deliberate recording of emotional friction. It suggests the tug of war between perception and emotion. He's basically documenting his own emotional wrestling match right on the surface of the painting.
And even the colors, which are often so beautiful, they aren't playing nice with each other.
No, not at all. They act like characters in a light and shadow play.
Yeah.
They're described as being both complementary and competitive.
So they're not just blending peacefully into a nice gradient. They're actually fighting for dominance, pushing against each other, but somehow still serving the overall picture.
And what's so fascinating here is the philosophical framework that he uses for this.
Yeah.
The analysis suggests that Chen Tao-Ming is engaged in an eternal struggle with what's identified as the typical Western dilemma.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, as it's defined here, it's that feeling of unending psychological and social turmoil. The kind of modern Western assumption that anxiety and conflict are just perpetual states that have to be fought, one crisis after another.
Okay, so he accepts that turmoil is a given.
Exactly. He's not trying to solve the problem of human suffering. He's trying to contain the energy of that suffering and use it for something productive.
And that brings us to the core concept, the conceptual anchor of his entire practice.
It does. The source states that these conflicting elements, they aren't eliminated or neutralized. They are temporarily preserved in what is called dynamic tension.
Okay, we absolutely need to spend some time on this term, because for you, the listener, this is really the aha moment of this entire deep dive. Dynamic tension is not traditionally an art term.
No, not at all. Its origins are. Well, they couldn't be more different. It was coined by the legendary bodybuilder Charles Atlas.
Charles Atlas, for his famous resistance training system. That's incredible.
And the power of the analogy is just immense. Atlas's system, it works by strengthening two opposing muscle groups by having them fight against each other at the same time.
So you don't need weights or anything. The conflict, the friction between your own muscles generates the power.
That's it. So if we apply that concept to the canvas, the artist is using the strength of the rebellion, the chaotic layering, the clashing colors, to strengthen the cosmic harmony, and vice versa.
The tension is the structure.
Think about it visually. Imagine two brushstrokes. One is pushing horizontally, right? Demanding stillness, and another is pushing vertically, demanding movement. If they just canceled each other out, the result would be flat. Boring.
Right, nothing.
But because they're held there, preserved in dynamic tension, the friction between them creates this energetic glow, this vibration. The image gains visual depth, density, and immense structural power. Not despite the conflict, but because of it.
He's channeling resistance into creative strength.
Yes.
That intellectual leap, taking a concept from physical training and applying it to spiritual and compositional strength, that's what makes his work feel so energized.
He's not looking for exhaustion. He's looking for equilibrium through opposition. Which leads us to the ultimate goal. I mean, if dynamic tension is the mechanism, the work can't just stay in a state of eternal tug-of-war forever.
The battle has to lead somewhere.
There has to be a moment of respite, of resolution.
The journey has to conclude. And that desire for resolution, that connects him right back to the tradition of abstract expressionism.
Absolutely. Those artists were always searching for that one instant when the work is finally concluded, finished. It's almost this mystical moment where the painting itself tells you, okay, I'm done now.
And Chen Daoming is looking for that exact same moment. The source calls it the moment of respite.
And this goal, this search for resolution, it ties directly to the language of the great mystical poet William Blake.
Blake's concept of the reconciliation of contraries. This phrase, it just perfectly articulates what happens when that dynamic tension finally releases, even if it's just for a moment.
And this raises a really critical distinction. What's the difference between eliminating conflict and reconciling it?
That's a good question. Elimination is easy, right? You just get rid of the disagreement.
You kill it. But reconciliation is so much more profound. It implies that you accept the differences are permanent, you acknowledge their power, but you find a way for them to coexist, to function together inside a single unified whole.
They don't disappear.
Okay.
They learn to live together beautifully.
Exactly. The reconciliation of contraries allows those known differences, that intense inner turmoil, that rebellious streak, to be sublimated beautifully.
And sublimation, in this context, it means transforming that raw, conflicted energy into something higher, more aesthetically pleasing.
So the very process of painting becomes this deep, temporary psychological and spiritual relief. The energy doesn't go away, it just gets transformed into art.
And that transformation happens not just in the abstract picture, but also within the artist's own eternally restless soul.
Yes. The art is not a cure for the human condition of restlessness. It's a temporary, beautiful truce that allows him and allows the viewer to just breathe for a second before the struggle inevitably begins again.
It's just an immense feat of intellectual and aesthetic engineering.
It really is.
And this is truly the core takeaway for you. Chen Daoming creates this deep spiritual harmony, but he does it by deliberately containing and then utilizing dynamic, rebellious conflict.
He masterfully synthesizes these ancient Eastern concepts, the cosmic balance of yin and yang, with these very specific Western ideas.
Drawing inspiration all the way from the goals of abstract expressionism to the poetry of William Blake, and even, unbelievably, the physical training principles of Charles Atlas.
It's a powerful roadmap for understanding how creative strength is generated. It shows that the most profound stability isn't found by running away from the fight, but by giving the conflict a perfect, contained structure to rage within.
And we really want to thank Richard Vine, the author of New China, New Art, and former editor of Art in America, for giving us this framework to understand such complex and powerful work.
It gives you a whole new lens to see tension in art. And as you think about this concept, remember that dynamic tension isn't just a physical or visual principle.
That's a great point.
We usually see conflict as something to be, eliminated. But what happens when you intentionally apply this principle, using two opposing emotional or intellectual forces to strengthen both, to solve a personal dilemma?
What conflicts in your own life are ripe not for simple elimination, but for a kind of beautiful sublimation through dynamic opposition? That's the challenge that Chen Daoming's work leaves us with, and it's something for you to mull over long after this deep dive is concluded.